We're not a medical facility, so treatment is just the beginning. What we do when we get out of treatment is really the important things. And if there's not willingness there, then yeah, we got to kind of pump the brakes and figure out as a family, what can they do to protect themselves while that individual still continues to destroy their lives.
Hey Sam, great to connect with you today. Tell me a little bit about your role, who you are, and your role at Rob's Ranch.
Yeah, so I'm Sam Stouts. I'm an alumni of this program, and I am now the director of admissions. I've been working here since 2014. And so my role is trying to help families and addicts and alcoholics get to treatment.
Okay, so walk me through the process a little bit. I imagine that quite often it's a loved one calling in, concerned about somebody who needs treatment. What happens on the family side of things if somebody calls in on behalf of somebody else?
Yeah, so there's always a lot of questions because it's an unknown territory a lot of times of, hey, how do we get someone who we love, who we see with a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction, a lot of pain in their lives, how do we get that person to accept help? And so starting out, we're asking questions about, well, is your loved one willing? Are they asking for help or are they resistant? Because that really kind of determines which route we need to go next. Because if they're willing, if they're ready for treatment, that makes everything a little bit easier. And if there's not willingness there, then yeah, we got to kind of pump the brakes and figure out as a family, what can they do to protect themselves while that individual still continues to destroy their lives. So let's say the family, they talk to the individual, they're willing to get help. Next step would be a phone interview between the client and me. And that's just where the client's going to pick up the phone, call me, and I'm just going to ask them basic questions about them. We're going to get their perspective on what life looks like, what their addiction looks like, what sort of mental health do they struggle with, a little bit about just them, their background, their career, family, that sort of thing. And then we're going to shoot for a check-in date. We're not a medical facility, so most of the time, we're going to refer that individual and help that person get to a medical detox, which helps them come off of their substance of choice for 3 to 7 days. And then they're going to come straight to us afterwards for 30, 60, or 90-day stay. Now, let's say that the family is like, well, hey, my loved one doesn't want treatment. What do I do? We're going to recommend that family member, one, maybe get some counseling on their own, or two, goes to a program called Al-Anon, which is a lot of times through Alcoholics Anonymous home groups. There's Al-Anon meetings. That's for loved ones of addicts and alcoholics to help them understand what, enabling codependency and kind of putting up those walls of protection look like. There's interventionists we can help refer to. We don't always refer to interventionists because a lot of times we're dealing with guys who are ready and willing to get help. But there are people in the covered community here local that we can connect them with to help kind of bridge that gap.
Okay. So yeah, I've heard of Al-Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been to an Al-Anon meeting myself, and it was very helpful in some circumstances I was facing myself. Tell me a little bit about when they do make a decision that they are in need of help through Rob's Ranch. What does the onboarding process look like? And what does the first day, maybe the second day, third day, so on kind of look like?
When a client first gets here, they meet all of us here in the office. We start out with a urine analysis test. We're going to see what's in their system at check-in time. If they're coming from detox, we're not too worried about it. But if they choose not to go to detox, that's the other thing, is they got to be able to pass the drug and alcohol test for everything except for marijuana. Once they do that, they're going to come in and do some initial paperwork, which is all about them understanding their rights as a client. We're going to make sure they understand their confidentiality rights. We're going to get releases of information signed, help them understand their rules that they have to abide by while they're here in the program. And then we're going to get a little bit more in-depth personal information from them as well. We're then going to walk them over to their room, drop off all their personal belongings, give them a tour, and make sure they're aware of where everything's at on property, where our dining hall is, where the clients are hanging out when they're not in class. We're going to take them down to our client center where we do all of our classes, our group therapy sessions, our lectures. That's where all of our counselors' offices are. We're going to show them where the workout facility is, where the basketball court is, just so they're where everything's at. at least walking in the door. And then after that, they're going to come up and do a little bit more one-on-one paperwork. Once they say goodbye to their family's welcome to stay and participate in the initial paperwork, the tour. We want the family to be able to see that as well, because it's important for families to see, wow, this is a good place. I feel comfortable dropping my loved one off here. We want them to know exactly what they're getting into as well. After that, they'll come up here and do some more one-on-one paperwork, which is really just their final check-ins to make sure they have any other questions or concerns they can ask them at that time. And then they'll go on about their day and kind of hop in wherever the schedule is at. So, if they get done at, noon, we're going to send them to lunch, and then they'll go hit their first group therapy session in the afternoon block, and probably meet with their counselor one-on-one in that afternoon time as well. And so when they meet with their counselor for that first time, they're going to do an assessment, which really gives the counselor a deep understanding of what their addiction looks like, what their family history looks like, what their trauma, emotions look like, which then the counselor will draw up a treatment plan, sit down with the client to help them understand what that treatment plan consists of, and then they're off with the program after that.
Okay. So what are some highlights, do you think, about the program? I'm sure that there's an element of discretion. People want to come in and realize that this is a private process for them because they're opening up about all sorts of things that maybe they haven't even addressed before. So tell me a little bit about how you treat clients' confidentiality and privacy.
We really take that serious. We want guys to be open and transparent about themselves. And the only way they can do that is if they trust us to protect them. And so come the phones, we hit everybody with to not confirm or deny that we have anybody by that name, unless we know for sure that that person has release of information signed for that individual calling. And then in terms of, group therapy, the counselors, anything shared in a one-on-one session between the client and a counselor stays in that room. We don't take anything into group, anything outside of there, because that's protected. For me, when I was in treatment, it was a lot easier for me at first to open up in a one-on-one session compared to a big group session where I'm sharing one-on-one with the counselor compared to 40 men sitting in a circle. Now, eventually, for guys who are here for 90 days, there's going to be a time where, hey, we have to open up in that group therapy dynamic. But because the program is structured to where you do one-on-one sessions, you do small group sessions, you do big group sessions, you can start out slowly in one-on-one, build it up to small groups, and then go to big groups. But we want guys to feel trusted. We want them to feel like they, have trust in us. We want them to feel like they can be transparent and open with us. And we could only do that if we keep everything tight and secure in terms of their privacy.
That makes sense. What does the end of treatment look like? What happens when they finish their 30, 60, or 90 days?
Yeah, so we start with an aftercare plan. So when we have about 7 to 10 days left of our treatment, we're going to start talking about aftercare. So treatment is just the beginning. What we do when we get out of treatment is really the important things. Okay. That's where we're talking about sober living homes. That's where we're talking about outpatient counseling, Alcoholics Anonymous home groups, sponsorship, church involvement. The more of that stuff we can commit to getting out of treatment, the better chances that we're going to stay in recovery. And so that aftercare plan is a counselor challenging their client into, hey, how much of this stuff are you going to commit to before you get out of treatment? So the client will then spend some alone time working on that aftercare plan, identifying triggers, potential relapse areas, whether that be, certain relationships, certain environments, certain places. We want guys to think about those things because when we get out of treatment, those triggers and those relapse situations are going to present themselves. But it's about having that aftercare plan in front of us to help us stay focused on the end goal. And that's just staying grounded in recovery and staying engulfed in accountability. And so that's kind of what that last week looks like. Now, like I said, as many of those things as possible. And so whoever that person is going to have around them, whether that be their wife, their parents, their children, or, hopefully their sober living house managers or sober living partners. We want everybody to be on the same page. So we're going to make sure that that client is aware of like, hey, this is a group deal. You need to communicate what you're committing to all those people. And if they're willing to sign releases of information for those individuals, we'll bring everybody in and have kind of a final day session with the client, the counselor, and their support team to help them understand what that aftercare commitment looks like. And then the very last thing we do with that client is called a transition ceremony. So the client and the counselor is going to stand or sit up in front of the client group, and all the clients are going to give that client leaving a word of advice, a word of encouragement. They'll compliment them on, hey, you were really beneficial to me in my treatment because you did this, that, and the other. And so it's just a really powerful thing to hear kind of everybody else's perspective on that individual leaving, because it's a lot easier for us when we're in treatment to see the growth in other people than it is to see it in ourselves. And so that gives that client a little bit of perspective of what others are seeing.
Yeah. So for some clients that come in, they may not have insurance and they may not be able to afford to enter a program, but you have scholarships. Is that right? Can you tell me scholarships?
So our owner, Dick Liddell, he wanted everybody to experience Rob Drench if they were ready to get help. And so we are a nonprofit. We get donations. Every donation that comes to Rob Drench goes directly towards a scholarship fund to help people who can't afford treatment. And so at any given time, we have guys on full scholarship or partial scholarship, and anybody can qualify. What you have to commit to is that 90 days of treatment, 9 months of outpatient counseling, and 9 months of sober living afterwards. So it's a year-long commitment if you need scholarship help. But the reason we make guys commit to that is because it gives them the best chance at long-term recovery if they follow through with that year-long process. So we're really grateful for, all of our partners who donate money, because it goes directly towards those guys who really need it and are willing to put in the work to get it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your time today, Sam. This has been very enlightening. I didn't know all of these things about the program. I appreciate it. And
Yeah,
we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.